What's going on YouTube? Got another build guide for you today. We finally hit 100, and I've switched around quite a bit with the different ranged abilities, and they're all actually pretty enjoyable. Rapid fire is just the one I landed on for the most DPS by single target DPS by a long shot. Um, Penetrating shot is going to be a little bit better for clearing maps, clearing packs, just quickly zooming through. But rapid fire works just fine and absolutely annihilates bosses. So let's just get right into the tree, and we'll try to zoom through this as fast as we can. So starting with the skill tree, and with this being said, this tree and this paragon can be used almost universally for any of the abilities. So we'll kind of get into that later, but you only need to swap out, one or two pieces of gear and an aspect or two, and you can swap over to another ability with this same tree and not have to really adjust much at all outside of the items themselves. So we go puncture, enhanced puncture, fundamental puncture for that vulnerability. Then we have 5 points allocated into our main ability, and then we get 4 from our gloves. And again, we're using rapid fire. We also use combo points. As you can see, the combo points really adds a lot of damage. So we definitely like that one. Enhanced rapid fire and improved. This is just so we can gain a little energy. Advanced rapid fire is fine too if you're not having any energy concerns. You get a little more crit damage out of it. And then moving down, weapon mastery. This, I think every build will take all 3 of these. I'm actually looking to get it a couple plus points to this on my amulet, along with cooldown reduction and all that. It's not easy to find. You don't see this pop up too often on the amulets. Moving down, we take concealment. This is just for, I didn't use unstoppable until I got into the much higher, 40 plus nightmare dungeons, and it's just to save me a death here and there. And we used enhanced stealth, gain a little energy, and then concealment. First shot causes enemies to be vulnerable. You could go with either one. Guaranteed crit. We do plenty of critting, so I typically don't go with this one. I like the vulnerable one. And then we put 1 point into Dark Shroud, and then we get 4 from our pants. And then this is just damage reduction, and then we take 10% chance not to be consumed, along with movement speed per Dark Shroud. So this helps us zoom around a little bit. And then we take 3 exploit, just some more damage. And then malice, get some more damage to vulnerable enemies, which is a nice little damage boost. Then we come down to our imbuements. We use cold and shadow. We put 1 point into each, and then we get 4 points for each from our helmet. And then in shadow imbuement, we're going to take enhanced shadow imbuement and mixed shadow imbuement. Okay, and for cold, again, we allocate 1 of our points, and then we get 4 from our helmet. And then we take enhanced cold imbuement and blended cold imbuement for that chance to automatically freeze. And this will tie into some of our gear and stuff later that I will explain. Increased damage to chilled and frozen enemies. We take all 3 points there. We come down here. We take all 9 of the lucky hit chance small passives. So these are all really nice. And then down here, I kind of move these around a little bit, kind of depending on what I'm up to. If I'm mapping, I might put another point into movement speed. And then if, I'm doing more bossing or whatever, then I'll maybe move some points over to impetus. And then we do not use an ult. And then lastly, we come down to precision, and this just gives us more crit damage, all that kind of stuff, big damage boosts. Now moving to the Paragon, this is where this tree, I'm really happy with this tree. I think I was able to really optimize it and hit all the things I'd like to. So in the baseboard, we come up and we're using the infusion for 14. This is fully leveled, obviously. This is level 21, so it gives 115% imbued skill damage, massive. We take both of the rare nodes here, and then again, we're just taking intelligence so we can max this glyph out. Then we move up to, we take Eldritch Bounty, which gives us increased damage, increased resistance to our imbuement being used currently. The glyph we take is Ranger for marksman damage. And again, I think this tree would be fine for the melee abilities. You would just swap this glyph out for the cutthroat one, and otherwise everything else could stay the same for the most part. And then we take both rare nodes here, which is a lot of damage and some healing, some dex. But these are nice rare nodes. We path up through. We take another 30% imbued skill damage. So this right here is a lot of damage. This Paragon board. Then we move up to Tricks of the Trade, which we do not take because we don't use a marksman and a cutthroat. We use 2 marksman skills, so we don't actually take the rare node. We just mainly take this one for the glyph socket, and then, that's a really nice rare node. That's a nice rare node, and, a little bit of armor. So this is fully leveled as well, so it's providing almost 35% vulnerability. We just creep around and take all the strength necessary. Then we come over and we're going to go ahead and take Exploit Weakness. I will say that this was the node I took when I hit 100. This was the last thing that I did. So I pathed up through here first, and then with my last nodes is when I kind of worked my way down here, and I took, this is nice 20% vulnerable damage, and then we take the unique node. Coming up, we take the combat glyph, which is the increased crit strike damage out of our core. That's giving us almost 100% crit strike damage with our core skills. So that's massive. The rare nodes here, potion healing is kind of meh, and then vulnerability damage is really nice. And then we're just taking, it is an intelligence glyph, so we're just kind of creeping around taking all the intelligence. Then for our last board, we come up and we take Cunning Stratagem, non-combo points. And what this does is this gives us an extra arrow when we use max combo points. So normally by default, rapid fire shoots 8 arrows. With this, it shoots 9. So it is a fairly large damage increase. And based on the way we set up our rapid fire, each concurrent rapid fire does increase crit strike chance. So by the last few, it's almost a guaranteed crit. So it is a lot of damage, and this is really nice. The glyph we're taking is Canny, and this is for non-phys. This is giving us another almost 80% non-physical damage. So our cold and our shadow imbuement are getting massive bonuses. And this is intelligence, so again, we just kind of come around and take the intelligence. The rare nodes, we get armor, we get core skill damage, so this is a nice one as well. So this is our Paragon board. Again, I tried to keep it somewhat generic damage, vulnerability, core skill, crit, all that kind of stuff, so that it's a little bit easier if I want to switch over to another main core skill. As far as basic skill, Puncture is kind of the best one. I've tried playing around with some others. They buffed them recently, but it still seems that Puncture is the best one, so I would stick with that. Moving to gear, and a lot of this is similar to the penetrating shot guide I did previously. So some of it hasn't changed at all. Some of it, aspects have changed, things like that. So if you're looking at kind of how I got to this point, feel free to go back and review that guide. But this one should have all the information that you need and what you can work towards. So again, we want shadow imbuement, cold imbuement, cooldown reduction, and for the last life on kill is fantastic. There are not a ton of ways for ranged melee to regenerate life, so this is one of the easier ways to do it. But that's, you could replace that with armor or life or a number of other things. Those first 3 are really kind of what we're looking for. Moving on to the body armor. For our aspect, we just want to generate that free dark shroud on crit, which happens a lot, so it helps us on our uptime for dark shrouds. And then just damage reduction, life. Our big one here is imbued skill damage, and then obviously total armor, You know, all of these. This is kind of more of a defensive piece. You could maybe swap out a life or an armor for a damage or something like that. But I tried to keep my body armor mostly survivability. Now getting into the gloves. These are pretty standard. Crit strike chance, attack speed, +4 to our core skill. That's the most important line. So if you're running rapid fire or penetrating shot, your gloves would look similar, but it would be, you know, again, penetrating shot or barrage or something like that. And I do have the gloves that I would use for those. These were my penetrating shot gloves. As you can see, fairly similar. And then I also have barrage gloves, which aren't quite as good yet. I was playing around with barrage. I did not love the skill, but I also didn't get it to a point where I had all my everything set up in a way that I was happy with it. So I might give that a try again. But as you can see, this is really all it takes to be able to switch out to another core skill. You just again would have to maybe switch out the main aspect for the core skill itself. So, you know, barrage, ricochet chance, and then penetrating shot chance to or it splits on hit, right? So now moving on to the pants. Our big line on this one is the imbuement skill cooldown. Again, all these imbuement skill cooldowns drop our cooldown to about 7 seconds for an imbuement. So it's about perfect timing to throw out 3 shots of basic skill, 1 core, 3 shots of basic, 1 core, and that finishes 1 imbuement, and then we move to the next. So it basically keeps constant uptime on our imbuments, one or the other. And then we're using just basic skills grant, 20% damage reduction for 6 seconds. A nice little survivability aspect. Then moving on to our boots, I tried using the unique ones that drop chilled ground, but losing those extra evade charges is massive for fighting Uber Lilith and stuff like that. It just seemed better for me. I have yet to beat Uber Lilith, but from my attempts that I've done so far, the max evade charges are massive. And then we just want movement speed. Dodge chance is actually pretty nice. Damage reduction. These could be better. But now we move to this aspect, and this is one of our big ones that we use for mapping. And this is when you hit a crowd-controlled enemies, there's a 50% chance for that crowd control effect to spread to another affected enemy. So when we're using cold and chill, that chill can be spread to other enemies on hit. So this really helps proliferate our crowd control and allows us to spread those chills and freezes across packs when maybe things aren't being hit, because rapid fire doesn't hit as many enemies as, say, penetrating shot or something like that. So this really helps us slow down packs and things like that, even if enemies aren't being hit. So I think this is an underused aspect. I think it's really powerful. You'll see, you know, sometimes you'll light up an elite or something that's in a pack, and it'll freeze or die after it's been frozen, and it'll spread its freeze to the enemies around it, and everything is just locked up even though they haven't been hit with anything. So it works really nicely. On our weapon, we use the rapid fire, has 84% chance to ricochet to another target. Reason being is it just on the weapon gives you the highest percent. This helps with mapping and things like that a little bit. You could move this over, you know, if you don't necessarily care about the ricochet, and then move your skills deal damage based on primary resource over and increase that. I just really loved the ricochet, and again, for fighting Uber Lilith, it really helps kind of destroy those blood boils and stuff like that while you're fighting, and you don't have to concern yourself with them quite as much because the ricochet will off of the boss will destroy them. So, but again, on this, we're looking for I have a bow that I haven't decided which one I like better. It seems that all the dex is a massive damage bonus, and then vulnerability and core skill damage. This is kind of what I would expect to look for in a bow. Just a big dex, vulnerability, core, and crit. Like, that's pretty standard. I've been kind of playing around with both, trying to see. This one feels like a little bit more damage. I'm just assuming just because it has all that dex on there and I have so much vulnerability in core and crit elsewhere that this one seems to just be a little bit smoother. But either of these would be top tier bows that would work just fine. In fact, some people would probably prefer this one, depending on what you have on your gear. You'll see my rings and stuff are really powerful. So for now, I'm using this one. Moving to the amulet. This is a really nice amulet, and it's been very difficult to replace. But ideally, I would get weapon mastery and then percent dex would be ideal. I do have enough attributes to keep all my rare nodes alive even without this strength. But this re-rolling this amulet's like 3 million a piece now, so I'm just kind of trying to track down a new one. But we use basic skills attack, gain 45% attack speed, and this just helps us get off those 3 points to get our combo points and get bigger damage faster. Moving to the first ring, crit damage, imbued damage, vulnerable, max roll, crit strike. And now for this aspect, we use marksman skills, have a 10% chance to create an arrow storm. And this doesn't do a ton of damage, but what this does is it helps us proliferate our crowd controls and our chills and freezes. So when this comes out and starts hitting enemies that have been chilled or frozen, it starts spreading to the enemies nearby. So this just helps us with that. You can replace this with a number of other things, but for mapping and running nightmare dungeons, it's been pretty nice. Our second ring, we have the max roll, making an enemy vulnerable, has a 50% chance to grant 3% increased critical strike. We constantly make enemies vulnerable, so this shoots up right away. So it's essentially just a 9% increased crit strike chance, which is massive. And then our rolls, vulnerability, crit strike, crit damage, crit damage. And our weapons, we took a quick look at this one, and this is very similar. Core skill, crit strike damage, vulnerability, and dex. And then we are using skills deal damage based on the available primary resource. And then for our other weapon is essentially the same thing. Vulnerability, core skill, dex, and then crit. Except this time we're using attacking enemies with a basic skill increases damage of your next core skill by 10% up to 30. So again, shooting those 3 punctures to get our core skill or to get our combo points also provides 30% damage increase. So shooting those 3 shots is important. A number of people have asked about the unique that increases your damage. It's a dagger, I believe, and the fact is it's similar to this, but I don't think that the unique itself is as powerful as a strong legendary. So you are losing that 10% damage in the aspect if you have a max roll on your unique. But I still don't think it's as powerful as having a really nice legendary. And I choose sword simply because the explicit is crit strike damage as opposed to damage to close enemies on a dagger. So that's my reasoning. I tend to lean away from uniques unless they're kind of build defining, just because I often feel, and it's very similar in Path of Exile, where typically the unique line on it is going to be very powerful, but the other ones on it often are not as powerful as if you had a well-rolled legendary. So that's my reasoning behind that. And that's about it. Again, specializations, we use combo points. And kind of the last thing, if you're having uh, energy regen problems, this was the aspect that I was using to kind of help with that. I don't have that issue really anymore, so I am now using the arrow storm. But this aspect will allow you to regenerate a little bit faster, and again, as you can see, the ring is very similar. Crit, vulnerable is really what we want there, and then the imbued or another crit or whatever is fine to replace that second line with. And then again, this is a no unique build, but however, fighting Uber Lilith, these are very, very nice. The damage seems to be slightly lower because you're losing that +4 to your core skill, but with all those lucky hits and all the crowd control, it helps you stagger the boss and just kind of makes that a little bit easier and gives you a couple free phases in that fight to do some damage, just because using our normal gloves doesn't generate nearly as much stagger. So that's that. But that is an option. So keep that in mind if you see the Fists of Fate. But they are not needed, and I do think that the damage is better with the legendary gloves, especially for mapping and all that kind of stuff. And we do enough crowd control to not necessarily need to use these during mapping and running dungeons and things like that. So that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to answer any that I can. This build is fantastic. It's a lot of fun. So let me know, and I'm gonna try to keep jamming on Uber Lilith with this build, and try to make some adjustments. And if I will go ahead and beat her, I will make sure to let you know. All right, but thanks guys, and have a good one. Leave a like, and we'll see you next time.